Hey, so we are going to be creating a pretty basic 3D planet animation in After Effects, but utilizing some Blender. And the only thing we're going to be doing in Blender is creating our physical 3D model. You don't have to do this though, you can just download a basic sphere off the internet if you'd like. But if you do have Blender, which is free, all we have to do is just open up the program, we're going to select this starter cube and delete it. Then we're going to press Shift and A to create an UV sphere. Then this little window is going to pop up. If you don't see it, just click the arrow here. And we're going to change the segment count to 360. And we're going to change the ring count to 180. And this will make a near perfect circle. You can go forward and add texture to this if you'd like. However, I'm just going to simply leave it as a basic gray sphere. And we're going to go up to File, Export, and I'm going to export it as a .glb, but an OBJ will work as well. We just want the actual model file. So now that we're in After Effects, we're going to create a new composition, 1920 by 1080. And just like the last episode, the first things we're going to be doing is creating two new solids. One's going to be black for space, and the other one will be white for the stars. We can also go ahead and import our 3D model we just created by right-clicking Import, and then just selecting it. Just like the last video, again, we're going to add a CC ball action effect. This effect is how we get the star look, and all we need to do is just mess with some of these settings, as essentially it's just turning our white solid into all these little individual particles. For the scatter, we're going to bring this up to about 700. For grid spacing, this can be totally up to you, but I'm going to bring it down to about 15. And the ball size, I'm going to bring down to about 5. Then we're going to create a new camera. 2-node camera, all these settings can stay the same. Click OK. And then we're going to right-click on that camera, hover over the camera setting, and we're going to create an orbit null. So now what we're going to do is go back to our project window, and I'm actually going to drag out our planet object right on top. When you drag the 3D model onto your timeline, it's going to say that you need to be on the advanced renderer. That's fine. You can just click OK, and it'll automatically change it to that. This stuff can all stay the same, and if you ever need to change your your renderer again, you can just go down here to the button on that composition window and just change it. We can press S on our keyboard with the model selected, and I'm going to bring the scale down just a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is go back to the orbit null, and I'm going to press R to bring up the rotation property, and we're going to be messing with the Y rotation. So with the playhead at the beginning of the timeline, I'm going to press the stopwatch for Y rotation, and then I'm going to drag it forward to about the 3-second, 4-second mark, anywhere in between there. And then I'm going to drag this rotation and just change it a little bit. So now you can see our camera is orbiting around the model, and since the model just has some basic texture on it, we can actually see that we are rotating around it. I'm going to go ahead and ease this animation as well by selecting both keyframes, keyframe assistant, adding an ease. Then I'm going to go into the graph editor, making sure I'm editing the speed graph, and I'm going to drag this handle out just to make it a little bit smoother. Now the next thing we're going to do is, because this planet is just a solid white, of course you were welcome to add your own textures to it if you'd want to, but in After Effects and in this current edition of After Effects, you cannot directly throw effects onto 3D objects. It just won't work. So what to do to get around it is you can create a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to rename this to Planet Detail. And now what we're going to do is, with this new adjustment layer, we're going to go down here to the Toggle Switches and Modes button. We're going to click that once to bring up our track matte. I'm going to make this new adjustment layer a track matte of the planet 3D object. And then we're going to see two more little buttons pop up here. I'm going to hover over the first one and change it to a Luma matte just by clicking. And you can tell you're on Luma matte if you see this little sun icon down below here. Now the planet is being modified in terms of appearance by this adjustment layer. So if we go to the adjustment layer, we can now add any color we want. I'm going to go ahead and add a 4-color gradient like I did in the last episode, and just leave it how it is. I kind of like this bright color. Then I'm going to add a chromatic aberration effect right underneath the 4-color gradient as well. For the red aberration, I'm going to bring this up to -100 and bring the fall off to about 100 as well. And then I'm going to add the effect force motion blur. Now, the only reason I'm adding a force motion blur is because I feel the basic built-in motion blur in After Effects is a little underwhelming for certain effects. So this, you can really have a little bit more control over how it looks. Then, to get the actual sun that we're looking for, we're gonna create a new light, and we're gonna just make a spotlight. Then what you can do is down here in the bottom right of the composition window is you can change it to 2 views. And I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit here to see what we're looking at. And if we drag this forward, we can see where our camera is looking. I want the planet to start not as visible and then become visible. So now that I've oriented the light the way I want it, we can see over here on the right view that we can just barely see a little bit of light coming around the edge of the planet, and then as our camera moves, that light becomes definitely more visible. Now the next thing to do is to sell this artificial sun that we've created. And the way to do that is using an effect that I did in the last video where I just created a random distant sun. And so to do that, we're just gonna right click and create a new adjustment layer. And this is gonna be our primary flare. Then I'm going to add a lens flare effect to that, because the flare is a 2D layer, and if you make it a 3D layer, the effect just won't work. We need to just track the sun by hand. So what we're gonna do is, under the lens flare effect, I'm gonna click the stopwatch for flare center, and you can click this little button right here, and that will immediately move the point of interest to where your cursor is. So you can just simply click, and it'll move that flare right to where you placed it. And since we're tracking it, we can go down here to the layer, and press U to open up the keyframes we're tracking. Then what we can also do is go to the orbit null and press U to view where our last keyframe lands, which is just past the 5-second mark. And we're gonna create a new keyframe for the flare center. And now, since the sun is off screen, if we click this button to move our cursor, place the flare where it should be, and then we play this video back, since we're not easing, it's not gonna match up. So all we need to do is select both these keyframes, keyframe assistant, give them both an ease, select all 4 of those, go into the graph editor. Now we can see what the orbit null is doing, and we can kind of copy it with the flare center. So I'm just gonna drag this all the way out because I know the last one is right about there. And then if we look at this keyframe, we can also line those up. So that's the peak right about there. And there is an easier way you can do this. I like going in by hand because I like visualizing myself. So now if we play this back, we can see that it roughly matches what we're seeing here. That looks really good, actually. I like that lens flare, that giant flare. Then what we can do is change the lens type. I personally think the 105 works really well for this because it's bright and it kind of matches the look of what the real sun would be. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new adjustment layer, and I'm gonna rename this to Sun Glow, and it's gonna be on top of everything else. And I'm going to go up here to the rectangle tool, and I'm gonna actually change it to the ellipse tool, and we're gonna be creating a mask. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw a rough horizontal-ish oval over the planet, over the sun, and we can now kind of follow it here and see where it's at. And I'm gonna just do a rough oval. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as you're including both of them, then that's what matters. Then we can go down here to the mask layer, or excuse me, just the mask that's under our layer, and give it a little bit of a feather so it's smooth on the sides. And then what we're gonna do is, for this effect, I'm going to add a glow. Now, this already blew out our star. So to fix this, what I'm going to do is bring the radius up a little bit to about 150. But then I'm gonna bring the intensity up to about 1.7. And because it's still pretty blown out, I'm actually gonna bring the threshold up just a little bit. And now if we play back, our star is pretty bright. Our planet definitely lies well beyond, or well before the Goldilocks zone. It's pretty close to our sun here, so I guarantee it's probably a hot, kind of looks like a big gas giant, actually. But I think that looks really good, and you can really see it as we warp around here, this brightness coming off, reflecting off the planet here. It looks really nice. Now, because I want our planet to kind of look like a gas giant, I'm going to add another adjustment layer, and we're going to give our planet sort of an atmosphere. And we're going to do it in kind of an interesting way. So now we're going to actually mask again. And this time I'm going to draw just a big circle right around our planet, like so. And since our planet doesn't move at all, we don't have to track the mask, which is nice. Then we're going to add the effect chromatic aberration. Drag that right on top of our atmosphere layer. For the red aberration, we're going to bring this down to -2. For the blue, we're going to bring it to +2. And then what we're going to do is add a blur, but we're going to use the VR blur. And the reason for that is because the VR blur is a little bit more effective than the regular blur, if that makes sense. It's just because of what it's created for it's very effective. And we're going to bring the blurriness up to just 5. And so now, if we look at our animation, our planet, you can see, has just a little bit of an atmosphere to it. You can see some of those blues, you can see some of the green, just a little bit of the red, and it really sells that planet look now. Now, of course, if you added texture to your planet, this would look way cooler than my simple pinkish, reddish gas giant. But this is a very basic starter introduction to this. So right now, really, we are done. I'm going to add a few more finishing touches. And yeah, so let's do that now. What I want to do is add a little bit of color to this. Just like our last video, I added a little bit of some distant background nebulas. I want to do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is create a new shape layer. And I'm just going to draw out, well, I might just draw out a big oval just right over the middle here. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to change this color to maybe a blue, a rich blue like that. Then I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to this shape layer, bring this up to 1000, turn off the repeat edge pixels. And then I'm going to drag this shape layer. First, I'm going to rename it just nebula. It doesn't have to be anything special. And I'm going to drag this layer down below our star layer. And then I'm going to press T on the keyboard and bring its opacity down to maybe about 35-ish, just to make it not as prominent. So now we have a little bit more of kind of a bluish hue going on. I might change it just a little bit more, bring that down just a little bit. It's too much. Perfect. There is our basic 3D planet animation. And you can go ahead and add more flares to the background if you like, and you can get really creative with this if you want, but this is a very basic animation. It's a little bit of a taxing animation on your system if you don't have a lot of RAM. If I go ahead and look at my usage right now, just sitting here playing this animation, and of course After Effects is a pretty power-hungry program. I am currently using 37.8 gigabytes just for After Effects alone, and that's out of the 64 that I have installed on this system. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope I was able to get you on the right track of making a cool animation. You can get pretty creative with this, so feel free to go wild with it. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys.